Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. When different nations have launched colour television, the presentation can be carried out in a variety of ways. Some are very low-key, some went with specials featuring recognisable national characters, and some just slammed down on a big red button. But has the thought ever crossed your mind that in the days when colour television seemed like a distant dream, if your national broadcaster provided you with a seemingly instant answer, would you buy it? Sveriges Television, or SVT, was founded all the way back in 1956, when television was fully launched in the country of Sweden. Modelling itself after the BBC over here in the UK, SVT would be funded by a television licence paid by the TV owners, and would often show imported programming from the Beeb, as well as their own shows too. By the early 60s, television was gradually becoming more popular throughout Sweden, but broadcasts were exclusively in black and white. In regards to colour, how far off were the Swedes? Well, the Americans had been the first to properly introduce colour all the way back in 1953 using the NTSC standard, though it would take well over a decade before the public would seriously begin to take up colour sets, namely due to the initial cost of those that could show colour. Meanwhile, over in Asia, Japan became the first territory within that continent to introduce colour broadcasts in 1960. So the USA had been the trailblazer, and Japan was leading the way over in Asia. But what about Europe? The crucial year would be 1967, the year when several European nations began debuting colour programming to their eager audiences. Many had spent the 60s refining which colour standard they wished to use and perfecting the colour technology, not wanting to rush out a system with too many faults or issues. The Netherlands, France, West Germany and the United Kingdom were just some of the many nations within Europe to debut colour that year. But where was Sweden in all of this? Well, what if I told you they were well ahead of the game, introducing colour television in 1962? Wait, what? That's right, in the spring of 1962, SVT would explain to Swedish audiences that colour television had arrived, but not in the way many expected. No buttons were pressed, no grand ceremonies, not even a countdown to the big moment itself. Instead, technical expert Kjell Stensson went before the cameras to explain an exciting new technology. In his short 5-minute presentation, he explained that viewers wouldn't need to go out and buy a new colour-capable TV. Far from it. Why do that when this new technology can be accessed right on the very set that you're watching? Colour television on a black and white set? Well, that's ludicrous. Keep in mind though, back in 1962, SVT was the only channel on air in Sweden, and with no internet, this was seen as prime news, one that audiences would listen to attentively. Now, I don't speak Swedish, but thankfully I found a translation of this special short, so join me as we discover what exciting new technology awaited Swedish viewers in 1962. As you probably know, there's a lot of interest in the problem of colour television all over the world. Research is currently being carried out in America, the Soviet Union, Japan, and other places. I found it remarkable. About 1 month ago, a suggestion was unexpectedly presented to me as to how this problem could be solved, which had the advantage of extreme simplicity compared to the high-tech solutions. Like all great leaps of progress, it was based on very elementary ideas, and didn't demand more knowledge about optics and physics than what's taught in basic school. We all know that white light consists of a mixture of the whole spectrum, and white light can be split up by simply using a prism. We've seen this diagram in school. Put a prism in the way of a ray of white light, and the white light gets separated into all the colours of the spectrum, all the colours of the rainbow beginning with red, orange and so on, all the way down to violet. The term is colour dispersion. It's also possible to achieve colour dispersion by other means, which I will show you in the next picture. 2 slits are made in an opaque wall, and light is shone through them. The holes then act as 2 separate light sources. Depending on the distance to the opposite wall, the different colour components of the white light will reinforce or suppress each other, and this will cause an impression of colour. Now, this is 2 slits only, and the idea of this suggestion was to cover the TV screen with some kind of raster, a kind of grid composed of multiple slits. The man who suggested this, a resident of Boxhaus north of Landskrona, Paul Arn Utmeister, came up with the idea that a nylon stocking could be used, or very fine meshed curtain cloth, which would simply be put over the screen, thus creating such a raster. I have done precisely that with the monitor here in the studio. I've covered it with a stocking. That's why I asked you to have a nylon stocking, a scissors, and a roll of tape handy. It's essential that it's fine meshed, should you try something larger. I've made an experiment with this athletic undershirt, and clearly the holes are far too large for the effect to appear. However, if you put it up, you will see this picture of me suddenly appear in colour. Like I said earlier, the viewing distance is of utmost importance. You should experiment with moving closer and further away from the set to get the correct colour impression. In order to assist you, we have prepared a calibration card. Now, move your head very carefully, and when this spectrum appears, you have found the correct position. If you're too far away, the red colour may disappear. If you're too close, the green colour may go away. The result could be disastrous. For instance, our female announcers, who are beautiful blondes, may appear red-haired, which may be somewhat disconcerting for them. This is still in a very preliminary phase. I've been in contact with the television industry, which needless to say is very enthusiastic about this. They will engineer a kind of frame with tightening screws that allows you to fine-tune the distance, and it will naturally be available in very pleasing designs. If you now can see this colour range, white, red, yellow, green, blue, black, perhaps not in the absolutely correct nuances, but approximately, you will enjoy the following little film immensely. It's a video colour recording of different flowers, which I find to be a breathtaking symphony in colours. We would appreciate hearing your views. Please write to us and let us know how this experiment turned out. Well, did it work? As you have probably guessed by now, this entire thing was an elaborate April Fool's joke. You may have noticed I said this went out in the spring of 1962. The specific date it went out was April the 1st. Played completely straight-faced by Stenson, his technical delivery and inclusion of scientific breakdowns was convincing enough for many. In the years that followed, many who were children recounted their parents, mostly their fathers apparently, scrambling around the house for any pairs of nylon stockings they could find, all for the vain hope that they would be able to access the illustrious world of colour television. Had this been presented in any other way, I'd argue audiences wouldn't have bought it at all. But for a short time, a lot of Swedes bought into Stenson's presentation. And after all, at the end of the day, wasn't it just for a good laugh? With many thousands fooled by the stunt, the 1962 Sweden colour TV hoax would go on to be something of broadcasting legend. As for actual colour, no nylon required, test transmissions would eventually begin in late 1966, a similar time to a lot of other European territories. And a few years later, a regular colour service, accompanied by a colour licence fee, would begin in 1970, the specific date ironically being April the 1st. 8 years after the Swedes were made to believe colour TV was just a pair of stockings away, they now had it, at last, and this time, it was no hoax. I found this story fascinating to delve into, the lengths a broadcaster will go to play what's basically a practical joke on their audience. And believe it or not, it's not just SVT in Sweden who gave their shot at a prank. Perhaps SVT was merely continuing to follow the example set by the BBC, who themselves set up their own hoax back in 1957. The subject wasn't concerning colour TV, it was spaghetti trees. And no, I'm not making that up. Maybe that's a hoax to cover another time, alongside the BBC's other hoaxes that it's pulled over the years, all in good fun, of course. Whilst they don't happen all too often, I think it's great when television broadcasters decide to get in on the joke. In Sweden's case, I love the dryness of this presentation. It's played completely seriously, and I'm sure back in 1962, it was easy to buy into this supposed technology granting instant access to colour. With no way to fact check it, and no alternative, why not cut up a pair of your wife's stockings to whack on the telly? It may have fooled some viewers, but it remains a joyful, iconic slice of international broadcasting, where even though the serious face of professionalism seemed to reign, underneath it all, it was nothing more than a silly little joke for April Fools.